This episode of the WildFed podcast is brought to you by Surthrival. You can find some of the most potent, clean, and naturally sophisticated nutritional supplements available anywhere at surthrival.com. Wild immune system boosting mushroom supplements, testosterone boosting wild pine pollen tinctures, and just in time for Black Friday, a new line of the most potent and well-researched CBD products you'll find anywhere. Go to surthrival.com to learn more. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. Welcome back to the WildFed podcast. This is episode number 5, A Reason to Be Outside with my friend Jenna Rozelle. First, I want to remind you that season 1 of the WildFed show goes live on January 6th. Pre-orders are available now for all 8 episodes, each of which is a full 30 minutes long. It's 4 hours of high production content, all about the wild foods lifestyle. There's hunting, fishing, foraging, and incredible cooking. So check out the season trailer and individual episode trailers on our website or on our YouTube channel. As we prepare to launch, I've been doing a lot of guest appearances on other podcasts, and in preparation for those interviews, I've been sending episodes of the WildFed TV show along to the interviewers to watch. The reception has been awesome. Not a lot of people have seen those shows, so it's really been exciting to me to get that feedback from other podcasters. Anyway, I just can't wait for you to see the shows. I think they have the potential to do a lot to further the wild food culture in the next decade, so like into the 2020s. Also, a huge thank you to everyone who signed up to be part of the WildFed Season 1 experience. That's our 9-week digital program that begins on the same day we're releasing the show, but it includes a bunch of bonus material, exclusive Q&As, and a private member group moderated by me and my team. If you want to get involved with this lifestyle or just deepen your practice in this lifestyle or just meet other people who share your values and sort of the things that you're passionate about, this program's for you. You can find both the show and the 9-week program available for pre-order at wild-fed.com. Next week's show will be with Paul Greenberg, author of 4 Fish, The Future of the Last Wild Food, American Catch, The Fight for Our Local Seafood, and The Omega Principle, Seafood and the Quest for a Longer Life and Healthier Planet. 3 books about fish, fisheries, seafood, and the state of our oceans. If you like the WildFed podcast and its themes, you're not going to want to miss that episode. His books are also available on Audible, so you can listen to them too if that's the way you prefer to read your books. Be sure to check out my Instagram account at Daniel Vitalis if you don't already follow me. I use Instagram as a sort of microblog, and I write pretty extensively there. Yesterday, I wrote a piece about squirrel hunting in my area, and in particular, the difficulty right now due to the low squirrel population densities and how that's connected to last year's lack of acorn mast. Go over there to check out that piece. And that brings me to today's show with Jenna Rozelle. I first came across Jenna on social media. She's a fellow Mainer and passionate about the wild foods lifestyle. She's one of those people whose account I check when I need a little bit of inspiration to get me out in the field. We had an opportunity to sit down and talk about the wild foods lifestyle, where things are heading, and how people can get involved. If you like this show, go find her on Instagram at Jenna Rozelle and give her a follow. That's at Jenna, Jenna Rozelle. Give her a follow, give her some love, tell her you like the episode. Lastly, this is a new fledgling broadcast and it needs your support. Now, I get it. You're probably a rugged individual. You don't leave comments or reviews. That's for other people. You're too independent to get bogged down in that kind of nonsense. But I sincerely need your help. It'll just take a minute, so go over to iTunes or wherever you get this podcast and leave me a 5-star rating and review. And to those of you that did that last week, I read your comments and I really, really appreciate them. In fact, the whole WildFed team really, really appreciates you leaving that review and leaving that comment. Thanks again for listening. I'll be back next Tuesday with a new episode. And in the meantime, enjoy the show. Great. We are sitting in my guest room, basement or guest room?
It's both.
It is both.
I've slept in here many times.
But it's a walk-in basement, so it's not like a dungeon.
Right.
And that's
finished.
Important. There's light in here.
There's walls and...
Grant makes it feel a little dungeony.
Yeah, with his creepy comments.
Yep.
Welcome to the dungeon.
That's the voice of Jenna Rozelle you hear there. And we've just... I guess we've known each other online for a little while, but we are just meeting in person today. So we just got to have you over and share a squirrel meal. Let's talk a little bit about you.
Okay.
Who are you? I've got this bio here, which I could read, but it sounds so stuffy.
You got to ask me a more
Should I do it?
specific
I'm going to do
question.
it. No, that would be embarrassing. Okay, so I
You
know
have
you.
a bio for me?
I do. I have a whole file on you.
Whoa.
I told my assistant's no joke. I mean, she's serious.
Cool.
Jesse's the real deal.
I'd be curious to read that after the fact.
Okay. Well, it's your bio in here and a quote from you too. All right. So here's what I want to say about you. I met you, or I guess I first saw your stuff on Instagram, where I spend most of my social media time is focused there. So
Yeah.
I've known about you there for a while and always been like, oh, this is a person kind of local to me who does something very similar to what I'm doing, at least in what you present to the public, which is a sort of a hunting, fishing, foraging, food page there, right? Or macro blog. So that's how I first got to know you, and then started to see that you were involved in some organizations that I overlap with too. And it just was like, okay, we got to get together with this person and get to know more about what you do. So how's that? Does that give you a little start point? Tell us about what you do.
Yeah. I mean, my professional and my personal life overlap a whole lot. Like you said, it tends to be very outdoor centric. Most of my professional and personal time is spent doing whatever I can do outside. A lot of that is food centric. So a lot of my business is based around foraged foods.
What's your business? Tell us about it.
Well, as of now, I'd say in the past, 2 or 3 years, I've really been leaning towards teaching rather than supplying foraged foods. But the origin of my business was the supplying of foraged foods.
Restaurants and chefs?
Restaurants, breweries, herbalists. 1 year I did a CSA style program.
Oh, that's right. You were telling us about that when we spoke to you on the phone. That's a really neat idea, by the way. I can understand how maybe it's not exactly an easy market, but
yeah.
But the idea for people listening, a CSA, consumer supported agriculture, the way I know it is, you put some money up front, like a membership to a farm, and then you receive your produce weekly and typically at a pretty substantially lower rate because you've paid up front, right? So you were doing something like that with foraged ingredients?
Yeah.
It must have been challenging to provide all the food too.
It was. It was a very small scale. I think I only had I think it was between 10 and 15 people.
That's still a
What's
lot.
What's an example of a weekly?
So a weekly share, you can see I would post photos. Mm-hmm. Part of the deal was every week when I would deliver, rather than handwriting instructions for everything, because a large part of forage foods or supplying forage foods is also educating people on how to use them. Mm-hmm. And so rather than handwriting instructions for each customer, I would just post a photo of their share online, and then I would write instructions in the comment section so everybody could read it. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know, 1 week, let's say they'd get a tea bundle of whatever herbs and flowers were peaking, and then they would get a little berry box of fruit and maybe a berry box of nuts, and then a big bundle of bulk greens. What else?
Yeah, it just would depend on the season though, so much.
Yeah,
right?
Run
through the season, so
it changes week to week. Yeah. So there was a lot of variability, but yeah, I felt
how was the compliance? As far, you know what I mean by that? Were people utilizing it, or were people struggling? I have no
idea.
Yeah, hard to know.
I don't know.
It's I own a supplement business, and you never really know.
I was curious.
Once people get it, what they
do. It did have people asking me, reaching out with questions, and so that led me to assume, okay, they're actually using it.
Mm-hmm. Or some of it.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know how much of it got used.
I want to come back to something. I want to keep going with with kind of where your business is at now and what your focus is. But something I want to just circle back to for the three of us later is the interesting dichotomy between plants and wild animals, in that there's no laws prohibiting you from harvesting plants, selling them. But with animals, there are.
Correct.
But the weird thing being that plants come off of plants are the property of the property owner, and animals are not. So there's this weird kind of reciprocal thing going on. But take us to, when you said education before, you're teaching people sort of the ins and outs of foraged ingredients, things like that?
Yeah. I think after I had been sort of supplying forage foods for, I don't know, probably 4 years, then I started feeling okay, I have And that was just professionally. You know, I had been doing it personally for quite a few years prior to that as well. And then at that point, I felt like, okay, I have people were always reaching out to me with questions, and I was like, okay, I should probably try teaching, or at least sharing. You know what I mean? I was really hesitant to step into the teacher role. I felt very underqualified, you know. You kind of compare yourself to everybody else who you have learned from, and you're like, I'm never going to fill those shoes, and therefore I should just keep my mouth shut.
Yeah. I can really relate to that, actually. People probably don't believe that because I never keep my mouth shut, but I do have an example. Anyway, go ahead.
But you know, there was enough interest in people that I was interacting with where I felt like it was worth trying. And then, you know, overcoming those anxieties and just like repeating. And I was always getting good responses. And, you know, in the beginning, I think I went into it mistakenly thinking that people were wanting like a botany lesson. And what I've come to learn is that that's not what they're looking for. They're just looking for a reason to be outside.
Such a good point. I know that whenever I've been on a stage before to talk, the audience I imagine, you know, and who, like, I have this problem where I imagine doctors, medical doctors, and physicists are in the audience. And so I then
everybody who's way more qualified than you.
Yeah, and then I over prepare, and then I get up there and I'm like, oh, if I just make this talk into a kid's book, everyone's going to be way happier and they're going to enjoy it more, because most people in that kind of an environment don't want academic lessons. They want to like get a little piece of what you do and the insight into you, and then they want the like simplest possible lesson on, because people are so overwhelmed, right? Yeah.
And really like, so I think in the last like 3 years of my teaching, I'm leaning into that. I'm realizing that, that what I do have to offer has value. And what I do have to offer is mostly just enthusiasm. You know what I mean?
I'm sure there's more than that.
But no, I do think that the enthusiasm and just like the inquisitiveness, it makes it more approachable for people.
Well, it's definitely an important component of it.
And more approachable for myself, you know what I mean? Because then I just get to be myself and not like, I still chronically over prepare like you do. And like, I don't sleep for a few nights before a class and things like that. But,
so you're doing like classic workshop type stuff?
Yeah, I'll do, I have like two loose formats that I'm working with for the past couple years. I'll do like a open to the public seasonal class.
Okay.
So we'll go to a piece of property and we'll walk around and talk about what that piece of land has to offer in that season when we're there. And then we'll, you know, extrapolate into what it might offer through other seasons as well. And I have started incorporating in the last 2 years. It's been omnivorous. It's not just plant-based anymore.
Oh, that's great.
Which people have been surprisingly interested in.
Do you feel like, on that note, do you feel like the era of veganism is kind of ended? It's like, I know it's still going, but like, do you feel like it's over the hill now? Like, as far as like like I experienced it growing and growing and growing. And now I feel like that there was like the pinnacle was when it was like everything on Netflix was like forks over knives. And then I feel like it's kind of like, now Ranella's on there. And it's like, I feel like it's sort of, it peaked and now it's still huge, but it's not like it's massively expanding like it was before. That's I don't know, curious how you feel about that.
I mean, even Ranella gets a fair amount of pushback.
Yeah, well, they're out there. They're out there for sure. Yeah, I know.
But
they'll all die.
It's an interesting conversation. It's
I don't even know what you're about to say.
I was just thinking pernicious anemia, man. It does tear you down. I know that I have chronic pain from being a vegan for so long. I mean, 10 years like beats the shit out of your body.
I don't really know any vegans who go out there and do this type of thing, you know, who go out and forage.
No,
I've had vegans in my classes. Yeah.
But it's not as common as you would expect. That there is a really like tight correlation between wanting to be in nature and being vegans, because most vegans, and I'm saying this as somebody who was one for a long time, usually there's this sense that I want to do something more natural, but that doesn't translate 100% over to, so I will go into nature and do this. Because most people who go into nature and do this suddenly realize like, I thought this was going to be like the Garden of Eden. There'd just be stuff everywhere that I pick and eat. And like, I have to process this stuff, you know? Because like, there's like a mythology in veganism that the nature is full of all these plant foods that would sustain you. And boy, it couldn't be further from the truth, right?
Well, not without work.
Yeah. And a deep knowledge of changing seasons. There is like there's something out there that will feed you for 2 weeks, and then you better get on to the next thing. It's not like, you know, apples are year round on the trees or whatever. I mean, I think that's what I was imagined.
At least here, I don't know what it looks like in another part of the world.
Rainy seasons.
Yeah, like California or
dry seasons. Yeah, there's definitely more food, and you know, as you get down toward the equator for sure, but I mean, it's still not like, it becomes a very but the thing is, in my experience, as you start to head south, it starts to become more inhospitable. Well, once you push through that temperate zone, you start getting subtropical. Now you got like a lot of things that bite you, a lot of things that envenomate you and sting you, and things with huge jaws and teeth, and tremendous fungal infections and bacterial infections and dark swamps, and like, it's not like, oh, now I found Eden. It's like, there's some breadfruit or whatever, but like, I gotta go through the gauntlet of alligators, winter. You know?
I'll definitely take winter.
Every day of the week I'll take winter. No,
I'll even take
half the year.
disease.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's ever made me think about leaving. Back to you. So you were saying one format is an open to the public, out on the land kind of.
So I offer.
That's a day long type thing.
It's usually like 4 hours.
Yep.
I haven't been doing weekends because my husband and I are trying to build our house, and that's often the weekends are the only time that we have there together to really work on that. But
for people listening, this is all happening in Maine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So once we get the house to a certain point, then I might change my format and do like a longer, like a weekend long or a Saturday long or something like that. But as of now, it's like weekday, evening, usually 3 or 4 hours, which is really short, honestly, for something like that. I still find myself just like spewing, and then it's over before I know it, and I'm left feeling like I didn't talk about even a fraction of the things that I would have liked to have talked about. You know what I mean? I'm looking forward to be able to doing longer format classes. I think I'll probably solidify some ideas over this winter about how I want to bring that into reality over the next year or so. And then the other format that I'm currently offering is like private lessons. So people can hire me to come if they own a piece of land, or if they frequent a public parcel, then I'll go walk that with them and talk about how they can utilize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are fun.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both fun, but concept. People get a lot out of those, I think. You know, the public classes, I try to do them all. I'll try to do like a series on the same parcel for every season. Yeah. And so I get a lot of repeat people coming back so they can see the same place and the same plants throughout the whole year. So that's also really great. But the private classes where people get to see what's usable on the land that they're actually spending their time on, I think people probably get the most out of that.
Man, I love a private one-on-one with somebody so much more than the group class. I've got to lead those kind of classes too for foraging, and feel sometimes like I'm doing like a museum tour. You know what I mean? Over here, you'll notice, you know, and you're going from plant to plant. And one of the things that's hard too is you've got all these trampling feet that you're dragging through. So making a lot more impact on that landscape. And then, you know, you find a really nice specimen of something, but you're 15 people. It's like, it's not the same as with one person, and you can do some of the work.
Yeah. And I mean, in those ones, it's usually private property that I'm holding those on. You know, I'm lucky enough to have a lot of friends and colleagues that are farmers, or they own parcels that they let me hold the classes on. And so the students aren't going to get to go back and use those places. You know what I mean? So it's like they kind of have to translate what they learn there and then try and bring that over to wherever they are spending their time. And I think it just doesn't really sink in as much as if you're walking around some place where, like the actual place where somebody is going to be frequenting.
It's hard bringing people to. It's like when you got here today and you were like, "Oh, what's that road over there that I drove on?" And it was like, "Oh no, stay off that road.
My spot.
That's where I go." It's hard to bring people to. Yeah, it's just one flock.
They're never there.
No, there was like 4.
Yeah, they're only there in the winter though. Come spring, I don't know, they move on to other foraging grounds. And there's a few things I want to talk about. I want to continue on just a little of what you're involved in now because you have a connection to Hunt to Eat and you have a connection to Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. So I was wondering if you want to talk a little bit about that too.
Sure. I'm on the board for the New England chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. I have been for the last about 2 years, I think. And they're great.
Very fast-growing organization from what I can tell, right?
Oh, my God. Like
they just seem to be
ship.
expanding.
Can you kind of sum up what that organization is?
Yeah. It's, well, let's see. They're based out of Missoula now. They were started in Oregon. But they're a non-species specific conservation organization that happens to be dominated. Our membership and our leadership is dominated by outdoorsmen, hunters and anglers, but we're not exclusive to hunting and angling. You know what I mean? So a lot of our work is focused on protecting habitat. And, we're proponents of science-based wildlife management.
Also seems like access is a major part of...
Huge.
And that's just like, there's no short, like here in Maine, coming into hunting pretty late in my life, I didn't grow up really thinking about access. For plant foraging, it's so different. And then as a hunter, you start to notice very quickly, like even in the last 3-4 years, I've really noticed like, oh, that property's posted now, that's posted now. And you start to see that, because for people listening who aren't familiar with this, here in Maine, we have presumed access to property. So if somebody doesn't post it, you can access that for hunting or fishing unless they ask you to leave, in which case, then you'd be trespassing. Whereas a lot of states, especially in the West, trespassing is a much more serious thing. But we're lucky here, Maine, New Hampshire, I believe Vermont's the same way. So, once somebody posts it, though, then that's, no more access without permission. So what's going on here is we're watching, there's all of these big open tracts of land and it's full of game. Your game, like our game. It's like we're the owners of that game, technically. It's in trust for us. But we can't access that game because there's no way to get into those properties. And so one of the things, I'm a member of BHA, and one of the things that I like is just the focus on access because it feels like for future, for the rest of my lifetime, and then for the future generations of hunters and anglers, that's going to be one of the most crucial topics.
And not just hunters and anglers, all recreators.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean?
So as landowners, would you ever post your land?
I don't post my land, no.
Man, the first year I lived here, I posted it heavily.
Like all around?
Well, the whole road, right? I own all that road frontage coming in here. So I posted all of that. Because I wanted to hunt it exclusively, and I just didn't know. I hadn't been involved in it long enough to understand sort of like that was going to make me unpopular. And,
you didn't know that?
Well, I didn't know.
Come on.
What I didn't know
like,
was that I had moved in here with a wave of gentrifiers to this town.
Yeah.
And so my neighbor is just this really great guy. He taught me to fish, and he grew up here. And so it's like, this neighborhood wasn't a neighborhood, and it was before all this land was a big hemlock hellhole, if you tell me. And, people would hunt through this all season. And so what's weird is when you move into an area where your newly built home or your newly acquired property is a place people have hunted their whole lives. I mean, since they were young enough to carry a 22 around. I mean, they've always hunted it. And then all of a sudden you're the out of town asshole who moves in and then you post it, right? So Will's coming to me the first year. He's like, hey man, I just, so-and-so down the road at the mechanic shop said, I never seen land posted so quick. What goddamn that asshole? And so I was like, okay, don't do that. I think one of the good alternative options that we have in the state here are those signs that say access by permission only. And I think in order to use those, you're supposed to put your name and phone number on there so that you can be contacted. I think that's a nice alternative because it's saying, hey, it's not closed, but I'm not
You
just
gotta
letting
ask.
any Yahoo in here either. And I think that's fair enough too when you're carrying around a weapon that has a 1,000-yard lethal range,
Right.
And
Yeah, I thought about it when I first bought my land, mostly because I had a Great Dane that, if you got buck fever,
Yeah.
could look like a deer.
Yeah, and a lot of old timers around here will shoot a deer in the deer woods. I mean, that used to be the thing. If your shoot a dog in the deer woods.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, back in the day, if your dog was in there pushing deer around, they'd just kill your dog, and
Yep.
no one would bat an eye at it.
Yeah.
Now it's like dogs have gone from being like a utilitarian farm animal or whatever to
babies.
being our little babies.
Yeah.
I think about that all the time. If somebody shot my dog's wearing orange today. If somebody shot my dog,
Right.
man, you better just I just need to walk away because it's like that could devolve quick, right? My goodness. It was an accident. It's
Yeah.
like,
So that was that was the only thing that was really leading me to think maybe we
but you
should-
never did post it.
I didn't. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have people hunting on it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those places that the locals, they've been hunting there for a long time, and I'm not about to tell them they can't.
Yeah. Same. I do like to talk to people who are hunting here. Not a lot of people ended up actually on this property, but when they do, it's like, it is nice to talk to people. I had a guy who was here last year who was hunting, snowshoe hares. I got some guys who hunt deer in the back. I don't ever have that concern about like, oh, they're going to get all the game. I'm more like concerned about like my own stands and stuff,
Yeah.
like how they'll, you spend a lot of time trying to like manicure and keep a thing just right, create the right conditions. And then if somebody tramples through there, that can be frustrating. But all in all, I guess back to your original thing, Grant, is like, I access so much land, by the, what would you call it? Just by the like benevolence of others. And man, I've realized like better pay that back,
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I'm with you.
okay. So BHA, another thing I want to point out about them, for people who might not be familiar, is what's interesting to me about them is, and I'm a member of several different conservation groups. I'm part of the Wild Turkey Federation. I'm part of, who else? A few others. Often it'll be like during the time I'm working on targeting that species, I get like this pang inside where like, I should support that group, this group. But BHA is probably the only one that I'm a part of, I'm familiar with, that has such a youthful, new school feel to it.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of new hunters, and I think that's a big part of the WildFed community, are people who are coming into this stuff as adults and going like, oh, okay, some of these organizations I don't relate to so much, or they feel like they would be my mom and dad's generation or my grandparents' generation, where BHA seems to be right on the cutting edge of what's happening now, what's cool, what the equipment, tools, techniques, hunting styles, media styles, and everything that people today are kind of using, consuming, and understanding. So you feel that characterizes them pretty well. And what is the demographic like?
Yeah. I don't honestly know how they did that, but they
Trucker hats. The key I've noticed
They
right
do
now
have
is
cool
truck.
merch.
You got to have cool merch.
They have these public.
You know what we did? You know what we did?
t-shirts.
This is so bad. I'm going to tell you this. So for WildFed, it was like trying to get a hat and a t-shirt that I actually would wear myself is very difficult. I can't believe how hard it is. We're on how many deep are we into this hat project? So anyway.
Second company.
Yeah. Well, we actually first looked at a few other companies too, but yeah, we keep getting bumped around. Anyway, on the t-shirt level, I had my brother call up BHA and be like, this was how I gave him a script. The script was essentially like, yes, I'm very sensitive to the fit of my t-shirts, and I really like the way your public landowner t-shirt fits. And I really like the look of the public landowner shirt. But before I buy it, I'm really curious. Do you know what the shirt blank is? Because I know what shirts I like and don't like.
Did he make that call?
And they were like, oh, it's a 60-40 cotton polytwill. They didn't tell us. Yeah, he called. Because I was like, if I can figure out like who makes that t-shirt, because the fit
good,
is
right?
yeah, it's not one of those shirts that's so like sheer that like, that it's
disintegrate.
if you're 18,
Right,
it looks
right.
awesome on you. Or if you're like a CrossFit guy, but once you're not anymore, you're like, yeah, I don't want to wear that. It doesn't disintegrate, like you said, or get holes from washing it, but it also fits in a sort of athletic way. It's just that's a good shirt.
So we didn't get an answer though?
No, they wouldn't tell. Well, they just were like, get out of here, No, we're not telling you that.
I might be able to find out.
All right. Sweet. I'll do another color, I promise.
Yeah, it is a good shirt. So that could have been a part of their grand plan on how
Are they young folks who started it though? Is it Lantani? Is that the
Lantani is our fearless leader. He's pretty young. Yeah, I don't know how old he is. 30s, 40s, and yeah, most of our membership. I haven't gotten the most recent numbers, but I think as of last year, over 50% of our members were under 40 years old.
That's incredible.
And that's insane for a conservation organization. Like, they're heavily dominated by old white men.
Yeah, I feel like Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and then everything happening around Steve Rinella is catalyzed a kind of a new hunting movement where young folks, which is so crucial when you see hunting numbers and how they're dwindling, and just how that is how we fund our incredible wildlife management system in the United States.
Yeah.
Or at least one that's better than anywhere else I've ever heard of. It's really refreshing to see. So anyway, I mean, they're probably the only group that I maintain a regular membership to. Other ones I'll join, I'll pay the membership fee for a year or something, and then I end up somewhere else. But I've stayed connected with them. I think that's a great organization. And they're focused on a kind of different style of, I don't want to say style of hunting, but really like backcountry is the focus, right? And public land being a big part of it out west.
Yep.
Must be interesting being part of the New England chapter in that public land is not how we hunt here in the way that people out west do, right?
Yeah, there is a big difference in like the aesthetic of the eastern and western chapters. But really, like, it does kind of boil down to the main ethos of like habitat first, and that's the same throughout the whole country. Like, that needs to be preserved, because once that's gone, it's gone, and then you can't do any of the other things you're talking about doing.
Yeah. Where did you and how did you get into? I want to start with how you got into the plant side of things. And then I'm curious how you sort of mentioned the word omnivory before. It's funny how little that word gets used in our culture. It's bizarre to me because especially not just in culture, but even in our subculture, and this is a big part of what got Grant and I focused on WildFed was this conversation about why are there plant people and animal hunting people, and why don't hunters forage and why don't foragers hunt? Generally speaking, is part of why we want to talk to you today, because it's like, for us, when we see somebody who's doing both, it's like, oh yeah, cool. Because like when I hang out with the foragers, sometimes it's like I feel like this bloodthirsty savage, and then when I hang out with the hunters, I'm like this like soft plant guy who just wants to weave baskets, and it's like I feel so awkward in both camps,
Yeah, I know what you mean, but there's a lot of overlap, and I think
I'm being very general there.
If you get them in a room by themselves, they probably like both.
Or you cook them something good too. I mean,
that's the key.
I have guys who are like, 3 years ago at that turkey camp, that leek thing you cooked there, my goodness. Or like Matt, he's like, sheesh. Tell you what, a couple years ago, he made this stinging nettle thing, and that was good, But and there are a lot of traditional ones: maple syrup, blueberries, fiddleheads up here, right?
Right.
The hunters all know that
Yes.
stuff, and it's the other side. I would say is a little more bigoted. It's the plant people.
The plant people, for
they
sure.
They are not really into the hunting, fishing thing so much. More, it's changing right now.
Yeah,
and I think
man,
you're
I used
part
to
of
be
that.
one
We're
of
part
them.
of that. Yeah,
I
me
get
too.
it.
So I think we're all part of that change. But like, if I was going to be like if I was doing stand-up comedy and I was going to do big generalizations, it's like I would say the plant people are a little more bigoted against.
I would agree.
Hunters. It's funny.
Yeah.
Trying to get that. We hang out at a local smoothie place in town. It's like a superfood smoothie place.
Lots of plant folks.
There's a lot of plant folks in there.
Not a lot of meat
A lot
smoothies.
of hunters too, though. It's kind of
Undercover,
I'm getting this for my wife.
They're always playing. They got like Netflix nature documentaries playing all the time, and there'll be so many like food animals that you're like, I'm sitting there ordering a smoothie, but I'm like just watching the screen, and I just try to act like I'm watching it just as like, oh, it's beautiful, but I'm like, oh, look at that kill shot.
Yeah.
But no, it is interesting just to see like it's a lot harder to sell a plant person on animal stuff than it is to sell a hunter on plant. Hunters are like,
Because it's emotional. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That emotion doesn't really go the other way. People don't feel a whole lot of emotions about eating plants.
Yeah, there's no element of sadness to harvest
so
a plant.
true. Well, I do know some of those people. But I don't like hanging around those kind of people. To, like, say a prayer every time you pick up like an individual leaf people, you know. I would agree.
Be one of those
I would
too.
agree.
I keep it to myself.
I'm
if
a
that counts for
recovered version
anything.
of that. Yeah. I do like one big thank you. Covers everything.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I think you're right, because it isn't emotional, and I think a lot of hunters have deeply integrated into their psyche the idea of taking wild food from the landscape. That's been part of their life, and the most plant people didn't come to it from that already. But how did you get started with plants? Let's start there, because it seems like you did that longer.
Yeah, I did do that much longer. I didn't. Well, when I was growing up, my mom, still is currently, but she's an herbalist.
Oh, okay.
And so, and also just sort of an outdoor enthusiast. Like, she was never. I don't think she would call herself a forager, but she did raise me collecting my own medicine and just sort of presented that. Well, not even presented, but just she led her life in a way that showed me that that plants were medicine and they were food and they're everywhere and they're accessible, and
also that it sounds like Arthur Haynes and you know Arthur?
Not personally, no.
I
know it's work.
His classes. No. He's who I was saying before. When I first met him, I used to do a lot of foraging, and I wasn't really that good at it till I met him, but I did forage a lot, especially for herbs. And then I started working with him, and then I stopped talking about foraging for a couple of years after that, because I was like, I don't know shit.
Well, because he's like an alien.
And then actually, then I stopped foraging for a while.
Oh, really?
I don't know why, I felt so impacted by his level of plant knowledge.
I feel that way too.
Yeah, it's hard to, but
I've
he's so
listened to
cool.
a few
like,
podcasts
he's so cool
with him
it.
and lost sleep over it.
This is in the field. I'll start. He knows so much about it that in the field, even though I'll know at a fairly high level how to do something, I'll still be like, how do I do this? It's like weird, because I just see him as such a master of it. Yeah, I revert to like a noob. But so anyway, like relating back to what you were saying before, but we always joke, him and I, about the wall of green and how for most people they just don't see plant individuals. They just see greenery stuff, and a lot of hunters will be like that too. You know, they'll know a few species they need to know, like those alders over there, because they need words for that.
They associate it with the animal.
Because
I used to
association
call
with the animal.
every coniferous plant a
pine.
pine tree.
Oh yeah. I mean, how many times have we seen? You know, if you go to the antique shops around here, you'll see all these old signs and posters, Maine, the pine tree state.
With a
spruce?
spruce?
With a spruce. Every time you're like, oh my God, you guys don't even know your own. It's a pine tree doesn't not have a Christmas tree shape.
Isn't the Maine state flower?
A pine tassel. It's not even a flower. Okay, so where are we going with that? The point is, growing up around herbalism, you would have understood from an early age that you would have been given eyes to see different species instead of just seeing like sort of a big green mat in front of you. That's so useful, because a lot of people don't start learning plants are individual species. And I mean, they know it intellectually, but they don't start to observe that until, once you're an adult.
Until they really try.
Yeah. And then,
then
it's a lot to learn later on, if you don't have that mindset, or I guess it's a deep paradigm thing.
Yeah.
You just don't see plants anymore unless they're in the supermarket, So you had that, which is great.
Yep, very useful. Very, very thankful that my mom kind of started me out with that perspective. I didn't fully appreciate it until adulthood.
Right. But when I was done rebelling,
Mm-hmm.
when did you start to forage?
Early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Really in earnest when I started homesteading up in Roque Bluffs, Maine. And, we were aiming at a life of semi-self-sufficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big part of it. And that's where I started doing it for myself in earnest. And then a few years of doing it there. And then I started selling at farmers markets and things like that. And that's also where I started hunting and fishing.
Okay.
But a few years after. It took me a couple years to
come around to it.
Yeah. I mean, even foraging, honestly, or even, I guess just even homesteading, it was tough for me because I did, like I said, my mom is an outdoor enthusiast, but she definitely comes from like the Leave No Trace camp.
Yep.
And that comes from a place of love, and I think a lot of good comes from that.
It was also very important at the time when it was when it became a term.
Yeah. And in certain landscapes currently, it's still very important, but not across the board. And I think,
in fact, it's bad for a lot of landscapes is the problem, right? Like if we're talking about, the high alpine zones of the White Mountains where stepping on a lichen, it might take 57 years to come back, right? Or whatever. But like,
a forest that has just been logged like 100 years ago, you need to
it needs some input.
It's like when Ben Falk said to me one time about the permaculturalist in Vermont. He said, like you break somebody's arm, you can't just like leave it to heal. You got to set it and then let it heal. Like, and then you got to do some more work to get it back. You can't. And what we've done is damaged a bunch of landscapes, then put the Leave No Trace in place. Right. And now everybody's
too
like,
late,
don't
folks.
touch it. Yeah. It's like, hey, no, that landscape needs a little help right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going into homesteading, like with that mindset, I really just started like bumping into these like walls within myself, you know what I mean? Of like, I can't do both of these things at the same time. Like I am
can't do which two things?
Living a contradiction right now.
Can't do
like having the Leave No Trace ethic,
gotcha.
And then also trying to live off of the land. Like, gonna have to touch something here.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I remember like cutting down my first tree for firewood and just crying.
Single tear. More than
crying. No, like weeping. And I couldn't do it again for a long time. Like it was very, very hard for me.
It's hard if somebody has never experienced that mindset for them to understand, but I understand, and anybody who's been like that understands what a good place that was coming from, right? Like you were really truly caring in such a passionate way. And it's not just like, oh, you're being too soft. It's like there's a generation of us who I always joke grew up on Captain Planet. Yep. It's like we received a deep inculcation in the idea of taking care of the environment. And what some person might just see as thinning some saplings would look like a Holocaust event to me. I'd be like, like the trees are bleeding, sap everywhere. It looked like a carnage.
Log yards just stacked up.
Might as well be bodies, right? Is how it looks.
That's exactly how it looks.
So funny. I know. That's interesting. Wow, that's really interesting because we harvest our solstice tree every year down in the back in the spruce grove. Yeah. And when I go down there now, what I just see is spruces all butted up against each other, looking for some breathing
need some room.
Yeah, and like it's nothing to me. But then when I post about it, there's inevitably the people who are like, "Why would you kill a tree?" And it's like, I understand you live in a place with no trees. You live in a city somewhere, and the only trees around are the ginkgos that have been planted or whatever. And this seems shocking, but like, come look at my yard. Like, this is only helping, but
it's crowded.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you slowly working your way up through the like.
Yeah, and honestly, like to this day, I still have like a seed of that, like just sort of inherent,
which is good though.
Human.
I'm glad you have that
guilt. Well, yeah, I think it can be good. And
do you have friends who kill just for the sake of like? Do you know people who are like, oh yeah, I just shot that thing. I just shot it because it was there. Like I know people that do that.
I have known people.
That's always like I feel like
not many.
Yeah, I don't know many either.
No,
but it makes me glad that I have that little bit of residual because I'm like, I really like hunting, and I can see like he's like, oh, just that Tweety bird landed right there, so I shot it. It's like, okay, that's weird, just for no reason. Like, you don't have any of that guilt in there. Like
I was having like that internal debate with myself. It was just like yesterday or the day before. I'm like working inside my house, but out of the corner of my eye, I'm watching this giant fat squirrel like eating the rest of my sunflower heads in my garden. And I'm like, I really want to shoot that thing right now. And then, but I'm like, I already have 2 squirrels in the fridge. I don't really need to shoot that thing right now.
Have 8 in the fridge.
But I really want to shoot that thing right now. And like, then I'm like, why am I feeling that? Like, this is, and then like looking back, like how I used to feel like, am I on a slippery slope? Like, have I gone too far?
Before you know it, you're
is
just
this
throwing
what
dynamite in the
bloodlust
lake.
is?
Oh, that's neat.
I didn't shoot it.
I would have shot it, I think. I was.
If I had more time, if I wasn't pinched for time, I might have shot it.
Oh, I put seeds out on my back here, and
You're baiting them?
They eat my bird seed. That's what they do. And I keep a 22 on a tripod, and I just slide that door open.
Whoa.
Because I eat a lot of squirrels. I mean, as you saw today, I mean, how many squirrels did we eat there?
A lot. That was a good pile.
Right? Yeah. Do you like the recipe?
It was super good.
I want to talk about that.
If I had,
you do or don't?
I do.
If I had bear fat, I would ask for the recipe, but I don't have.
I'll give you some bear fat.
All right, then I'd like the recipe as well.
Yeah. Well, it's really simple, but the acorn
that was a
flour
good way
is the
to
hardest.
ask for bear fat, by the way.
Yeah.
Huh?
I said that was a good way to ask.
Very diplomatic.
I love that recipe, but gee golly, I just don't have.
I'm shy on the ingredients. I'm like, bear fat, I'll give you all day. Don't ask me for any acorn flour. That's where the work goes in. But
I know when I've gone too far.
I was thinking about today, because Grant, how many times have you heard me say, I feel like this is an appropriate time to say this. Normally I wouldn't really want to reveal it, but how many times have you heard me say, like, I need to kill something today?
A handful.
Yeah. Or like sometimes like, I need to kill something in like now, And I'm like, what is that?
Yeah, what is that?
As somebody who's a vegan so long. Yeah. But then I feel, because one might wonder.
Is it because your freezer's not empty?
Which freezer?
Right. Of the many full freezers that you have, none of them are empty.
They're full. But we are. I mean, it is December, so that's why they're full. But
do you think, is it a seasonal thing, that
No,
impulse?
see, here's what I think. I think that, well, I've thought about it, and here's where I'm currently at with it. Because I've like awoken that thing in me that likes to hunt. And you could wonder, well, if you have all that you need to eat, why would you still want to do that? But like hunting was never a thing that people did for their nuclear family until very recently. It was a thing you did for your community. And I watch, as soon as it starts snowing out, I tend to start watching a lot of Inuit documentaries. Mm-hmm. I love watching people, how they, any even remnant of their traditional lifestyle up in the north. And one of the things I notice about the hunters up there is that they bring food back for the community, not just for their household. And as soon as they bring back a seal or a bear or a muskox or whatever it is, they're making phone calls and bringing everybody together for it. And I think that the desire to hunt, outside of even just saying, because I'm not saying because I'm such a great guy and I want to share it, but I think that's where the impulse inside is like, well, you don't just stop hunting because you have a freezer full. You always hunt, you're always hunting, and I've heard a few other people say that. It's like, well, I'm a hunter, I'm always hunting. And so I think that that's part of it, like, I don't think it translated into bloodlust over time as things changed, but I don't think but the thing is once you, how do I say this? Boy, it makes you feel really alive. Mm-hmm. And it puts you right at the heart of what being human is. And so I think sometimes I just feel like I've been on a lot of phone calls this week, and I've been reading a lot, and I've been watching videos, and I've been cleaning my house. And it's just like, I want to go interact in that way. And then it means either I can feed us or I can feed some other people too, which I like. So I think that's what it is. But
do you feel the same kind of thing about foraging at all?
I don't.
So or anything similar, like something
tough for me, different kingdom altogether. Yeah.
I mean, similar instinct, but yeah, they're different. I do, I'll feel that itch if I've been cooped up too long. But like, even if it's not hunting season, I'll be like, yeah, I'm going for a mushroom walk or something like that. You know what I mean? But it's a different flavor.
Different flavor.
Today
I notice people say hunting from mushroom hunting. You notice that?
Yeah. Well, I've marveled at this for years, because I always am like, what do you call it? Because I want to be able to, I've like that mind that wants to differentiate between those kingdoms. So it's like, oh, that's fungus. It's different. So I like foraging plants, gathering mushrooms, or some other word. But yeah, most people say hunting mushrooms.
Collecting.
Yep, collecting.
Picking.
But collecting then, I didn't know this because I started saying, like, I was getting clams. I was like, Arthur, what do you think of this idea of micro game? I was like, clams, insects, micro game. Small game, big game. I was like, micro game. He's like, anthropologists call it collecting, Daniel. I was like, oh. Stuff that you can pick up that is like an animal is collecting, I guess. So there's a term for that. With mushrooms, though, it's weird because they do have that. You'll hear all the time they're more closely related to animals than they are to plants.
Yeah.
And so they're
like, is there any species of plant or fungus where you're like, oh yeah, I want to go out and like you get that idea and you're like, I want to just go out and interact with that species.
Oh yeah.
That's something similar to that hunting feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I think it depends on what's in season. Mm-hmm. Like whatever I haven't found yet and I know is out there and it's peaking. Then that's what I'm going to be thinking about when I'm in my house. Like, that's what I'm going to be wanting to pursue. You know what I mean? Like in the early springtime,
itch to go do that.
I'm going to be like salivating thinking about greens. You know what I mean?
I was going to say something similar because I feel that with plants, I feel a craving to eat that plant.
Yeah.
I don't very often feel a craving to eat an animal. I'll feel a craving to hunt. And I feel a craving to cook, and then I want to eat that.
That's true.
I'll be like, I'll start feeling like, man, I need some like brightly colored antioxidant fruits really bad.
Yeah.
Like I need blueberries, choke cherries, raspberries, or
That'll
you said, spring greens. Like by the time winter's over, and the only vegetables I've had have come from California, and they're like turnips from Maine or whatever. I'm getting those fiddleheads and leeks, when that happens, Dame's Rocket, Wintercrest.
Yeah, man, that Wintercrest gets me every year.
I'm like, I want to eat as much as I can. Arthur's always joking, like, till I poop green. That's what you want in the spring. So I feel like tremendous cravings. And the other thing, I feel less pressure about, I'm not going to say I don't ever feel like, oh my God, deer season's almost over. I got to get it to happen. But I put a ton of time.
That pressure is crushing me right now.
Tomorrow's the last day of muzzle loading season. I feel that with plants and fungi a lot. I'll be stressing in bed at night, like I know there's like 2 days left for cranberries,
and the birds are eating them.
Yeah,
right
yeah,
now.
Exactly, right. Or other forages are out there on the fiddleheads and stuff. I feel way more stress to get out because to me the plant calendar is a little more demanding.
It's nonstop. Mm-hmm. You can't keep up. Mm-hmm. Oh my God! I mean, it's fun to try, but yeah, it's like a blood sport.
Do you have stuff this year that you missed that you really want to do? It's a blood sport.
It is. I mean, the animals are way better at it. The animals are way better at it than I am. You know what I mean? Like, the second that stuff is ripe, they're going to be there a few seconds earlier. And I'm always a few seconds too late. Yeah. So I get whatever they leave for me, which is fine. Probably a good system. What did I miss this year? Didn't get a whole lot of black locust blossoms.
We almost missed those. We almost missed the pine.
We did good on those. We almost missed the pine pollen.
Yeah, I only caught the tail end of pine pollen. I
caught the tassel end of pine pollen. Botany jokes are the worst jokes ever. They're so bad.
It's like right after dad jokes.
Yeah, it's like dad jokes. Then I don't know, botany jokes. A lot of dads are funnier.
Yeah, way funnier.
Get it? Pine tassel? Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Nerd alert. You get into cattails at all?
Not enough to like put any away.
There's that part of the year where the cattail spike is like a vegetable, and
I got those.
I did not. I missed that this year.
It's a short window.
Yeah, a very short
window. They turn to pollen like pretty quick,
and they stagger out, right? So they don't have like a what's that called? They have a asynchronous maturation. So I'll see some in pollen, and I'll be like, oh, I got to get moving, and then you find other ones that are unripe, or I think I got anyway. You got to be on top of those ones. But I miss that, and that's one of my favorite because those are so substantial.
Like God, they're so fatty.
Yeah, you feel like you're really eating.
Yeah,
right.
It's good.
So yeah,
that's how I feel about the milkweed blossoms.
Oh man,
it's like whoa, a vegetable.
I didn't do as good on milkweed this year as I've done in the past. I was traveling somewhere. I went away.
I gave you so much crap.
I didn't get any pods. That was one of the ones.
Year.
Oh, those are gnarly. I was like,
how'd they freeze?
So I blanched them.
Yeah.
And then I I blanched them, and then I put them into like square glass Tupperwares and froze them, and then I heated the bottom of those and popped them out like bricks.
Are these the buds?
buds and some that had opened into flowers, but primarily buds. So I popped them out of that, so they were like bricks, and then I'd vacuum seal those.
Cool.
And so I had them. I was like Kaiser Soze with like my, I don't know, like I had this like stash in the freezer.
I've never frozen them. They come out well?
They're quite good, but I find with milkweed, there's this sense of, like, for instance, with blueberries, I could eat them every single day of the year for the rest of my life, and I would not bat an eye. But you know how a lot of wild plants, you get that sense of like, this is kind of getting poisonous or something.
I've had enough.
Poisonous isn't maybe too strong, but there's some flavor in there that you're like, this is a seasonal vegetable.
I get that with dandelion greens.
Yeah. Try to turn it into a thing that you eat all year, and you can. So I ate them sparingly throughout the year, but at the end, Chicken Feather guy over here got really upset when I.
It was like, you still have those frozen bricks of milkweed? He's like, no, I just got rid of those. I'm like, why? Because the season's here.
If you, I was like, because it's milkweed season, bro. Like next week. Have you read Sam Thayer's books at all?
Yeah.
He's got this.
I don't have his new one.
Okay, in that one, he talks about the Chicken Feathers guy. And he's saying that inevitably at one of his workshops, he'll have the guy who wants to try to use all of the stuff he trims off because he's like, it's going to waste, you know? And he tells a story, kind of a joking allegory about a guy who's butchering chickens, but then he wants to try to use the feathers. He's convinced he's going to make pillows. And then he goes through this whole course of event that leads to the carcasses going bad and not even being able to use the meat, you know? And so Grant has a twinge of like, he hates to see me like put anything in the compost, you know?
Yeah. I used to, yeah.
Well, at least it's going in the compost.
I'm like, it's just going right back into the system,
exactly.
You know? It's like topping off the cistern with a little
that
water.
Story has actually helped me to dial it back.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
How'd you do on berries and fruits?
Pretty good, honestly. I sold more than I would have. I didn't get to keep as much as I would have liked to for myself, but I did all right on, I almost struck out on choke cherries because a bear just ripped down the whole grove. Like, didn't even leave the trees standing.
Down,
they
right?
just ripped the trees down.
What a jerk.
I don't blame him, man.
I'm like, do you have no forethought? Like, are you not going to want to come back here next year?
Grows back. It's like, that's the bear I want to eat, the one that's all fat on choke cherries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man. I have a problem with choke cherries. I just can't stop.
They're so good.
They're so damn good. I'm so good at like packing my mouth like a chipmunk and then just machine gun spitting out seeds. It's like the most efficient way to separate them from their fruit, and the seed is just in your mouth because every way you try to do it on a stovetop or through a grind, it just doesn't work. And then also, do you ever pound them out, break all the seeds and make like a fruit leather out of it that's like filled with broken
that
seeds?
Juice that you make?
Which you don't like.
I love the juice. I don't like eating the seeds.
Ah, okay. I do some of the seeds. So I put all of the choke cherries in a big soup pot or something, in a big sauce pan, and then a little bit of water, and I just cook them and mash them down, and then I'll take some of those, blend them in the blender so the seeds break up, add them back in to add that almond flavor.
Cool.
And then I strain all that into a really nice juice that I freeze. I thought you didn't like it.
No, I like the juice. I don't like the berries.
What I hate about the juice is when I take it out of the fridge, if I taste any, then I can't stop and I drink the whole bottle. It's so good. I mean, I can get why bears, because also, you know, I feel bad for bears when you watch how they try to forage with berries and
with their paws.
Those hands are not built for it. So
like, fuck this.
Imagine you're like,
they're aggressive.
It's like if you're like Wolverine and you want to like love somebody, you know, it's just like,
trying.
it's like, sorry, I killed another one. So I can see how because I get on those, man, just stripping off those Ramesses and just eating all those berries. I can imagine just being like, oh, I'll just eat it all.
I would have liked to have seen it happen.
Yeah.
I didn't appreciate coming in after the fact.
It's
When
like,
I had been watching that patch, like just waiting and waiting and waiting until they were ripe, and apparently I waited a day too long.
We worked on some black cherry this year, and it's interesting the difference, because the black cherry tree will eventually get so big that a bear can't, you know, it's like must become a 30-meter tree or something.
Big tree.
But yeah, 30, 40, 50 feet tall, right? Big, wide canopy. And then it's hard to get to the fruits. And then they're just all over the ground.
Yeah, most black cherries are lost on me. They go to the birds.
Yeah, I used to think they were better, but now I'm convinced choke cherry is this.
I don't know. I like them both.
I think I had the opposite. I was like, oh, I can do these.
choke cherries?
No, I like the black cherries.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. I used to like the black cherries more, and I would always kind of like be like, choke cherries are kind of tart or whatever,
Yeah.
or they're stringent. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
leave your
yeah.
mouth a little weird.
Exactly.
Now I don't know if it's because they're
That
easier.
day we were harvesting them, you were like, dude, and I was complaining about how bad they were. You're like, you just want them to be something they're not.
Yeah, he wants them to be supermarket black cherries.
I was
That's
like,
what it is.
I might have to re-examine my life now.
Yeah, I mean, you could extrapolate
Yeah,
that to a lot of places.
How about the autumn olives? Did you get into those?
That was the big one.
I didn't do great on those either.
Shameful. There was no good reason that I didn't collect more of those. I just didn't.
Yeah, same.
Didn't
it's a busy
do it.
time of year too, and then you get to where the hunting starts opening, and
Yep.
you're like, and even you know how it is before hunting opens, and you start to like get all your gear prepped and you're scouting,
And that's where your mind is.
Yeah.
Your brain's already
Yeah.
in it.
yeah,
Switched gears.
yeah, you need like a team effort almost to. Oh, okay. So I want to ask you about this then. Hey, we'll get right back to the show, but I wanted to take a moment to tell you how you can see season 1 of WildFed. If you head over to wild-fed.com right now, you'll see that pre-orders for season 1 are available alongside the season 1 experience. Both will begin on January 6th of 2020. If you choose the show on its own, you'll get access to a new episode every week for 8 weeks. Remember, these are 30-minute episodes, not the 22 minutes of a typical TV show. If you choose the program, it'll include season 1, but each week, along with a new episode, you'll receive a director's cut, where our producer Grant Giuliano and I break down the episode, discussing the background, the gear we use, the places and people and stories involved, as well as some of the comedy that took place on the side, some of the drama, some of the intrigue that we couldn't squeeze into the 30-minute format. You'll also get exclusive access to a weekly live Q&A, where we'll be answering your questions and discussing how you can get started hunting, fishing, and foraging for food. Additionally, this will all take place inside of a private member group where you'll have access to me and the WildFed team for a full 9 weeks, as well as a community of like-minded folks. If you just want to see the show on its own, it's $49. If you want to join me in the 9-week program, that's just $249. Go over to wild-fed.com to get the show or sign up for the program. Now, here's the rest of the podcast. Especially because you're part of BHA and you sit on that board and you're seeing you're seeing the scope and the scale of what it takes to maintain access to what's already our resource, our shared resource, right? So again, just to catch anybody up
wildlife,
who's
you mean?
listening, like wildlife in the United States is held in public trust, and that means that if a deer comes on my property, no matter what state we're in, that's all 50 states are this way.
Mm-hmm.
If a deer comes on my property, I don't own that deer. I just own the property that it's on. I can tell you can't access that deer till it leaves my property, but that's your deer as much as it's my deer. It's a shared bank account of wildlife. But we were talking before with plants, how they belong to the landowner. And there's this huge debate going on in the state. We've done a few interviews about algae and whether seaweeds, where do they fall in this? Who owns the seaweed? Because they're not plants, they're not fungi, they're not animals, they're algae, so they're in the protist kingdom.
They're below the high water mark.
And they don't have roots, but they do have a holdfast that connects them. So everybody's fighting about who owns that. But with plants, I think it's very clear the landowner owns it. You can log your property to baldness, so you can denude your landscape if you want to.
Yep.
So foraging being even more ancient to Homo sapiens, or let's say to I don't want to say Homo sapiens, but to hominins, then, because we know going back, we have evidence of Australopithecus afarensis, I believe is as far back as I know about, probably changed by now, but hunting, or at least scavenging animal bones. We see butchering marks and stuff 3.5 million years ago, 3.6 or something like that. But it's very likely earlier in our lineage, somewhere after we split from chimpanzees, that was about 6 million years ago from what I know. Somewhere in there, we were primarily plant eating. So foraging is even older to our species. And I think there's this tremendous heritage argument for foraging. This is a long setup, so sorry, I'll pass it on here in a second. But what is it? What do we do here? Because it would be, we came very close. I don't know if you remember, about 2 years ago, there was some news story circulating in Maine about making it illegal to forage here without landowner permission. And then if you were carrying a firearm while foraging, there was this $10,000 fine and potential prison time that was associated with it. And
I didn't know about that part.
yeah, it was actually, but then that kind of died down. I haven't heard much. And I was wondering if gun-carrying commercial foragers for fiddleheads might have had a conflict with a landowner or something. Because I was
I'm sure.
wondering how that, because, you know,
Or
we're in a concealed,
Matsutakis or something.
yeah, exactly. Some
That can
high
get
value.
ugly, yeah.
Yep, some high value, could be ramps even. There's also something that's happened in the state recently around wild rice, and the state's just banned foraging wild rice in any of the areas where they've planted it for wildfowl. So we're starting to see some stuff, and what I'm picturing is just a bureaucratic government that goes, it's going to be way easier to just put a blanket ban on this than to open up. It's hard enough to manage all the different species we have for hunting. If we have to manage every forageable species and come up with guidelines, like, it's just easier to ban foraging. And that's my big fear.
Yep.
And then do we need organizations like BHA or like Trout? Do we need like Leaks Unlimited, right? Do we need like the Appalachian Mountain Wild Cranberry? You know, I don't know. Like, do we? Well, I was thinking of the Rocky Mountain Elk Federation. Do we need the Appalachian Mountain Cranberry Federation to protect access to these things? Is it even possible? Have you thought about it? Like, I don't know. I'm just opening that conversation because I'm worried about the future
can
of
of
foraging.
worms, you mean?
Yeah, because right now, like, I forage on my own property. I forage on property I have permission, but frankly, I think most foragers are on all kinds of different properties.
Yeah.
You know.
And
you are stealing when you forage on we have that assumed access.
Yep.
You can go onto private property, but it is technically taking a rooted thing is technically stealing the landowner's property, and that's a really complicated
That's
issue.
like you can go pick from somebody's garden.
Yeah, it's illegal, right?
Yeah.
And then I don't know how it is in public land, but I think most public land, I believe
it
like
varies,
if you, right? Maine
like
says you
federal
can do
public land versus state public
Okay.
land versus town public land, and then whether it's for personal use versus commercial use. You know what I
Okay,
mean?
you're right. And then Maine
it's
has a couple
variable.
provisions for wreath making,
Yeah, you need a permit for balsam
Blueberries.
tipping.
Really?
fiddleheads.
Yeah.
Do you need a permit to take the tips off balsams?
Yeah. Most places, yeah. If you're doing it commercially, I
Oh,
mean, I
okay,
think
if
if you're
it's
going to
commercial.
make like a wreath for yourself, I don't know if you
Right,
need a
right,
permit for
okay.
If
that.
you're on
But
your own property, it's still the case?
no. If you're on your own property, you can do whatever you want.
And then we run into the issue we were talking about before. If you don't have a good background on how to do this, or it's just if the number of people who now hunt decided they were going to become foragers,
Yeah,
that's a lot. We're talking millions of people.
it's
So
a big impact.
you could denude landscapes very rapidly.
I mean, we see it with ramps.
For sure, and fiddleheads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what the best course of action would be. I
You haven't laid out a plan yet?
haven't solved that giant problem yet. No.
You're my only hope.
All right, let's end the podcast.
Yeah. And we'll be back with the WildFed podcast once we have a plan.
I don't know, man. That's tough. And honestly, I question myself. Like, would my opinion be self-serving? You know what I mean? Because I am a forager.
Of course it would be.
So, but at the heart of it, I do know that, like, you know, what needs to be the root of our concern and our legislation should be the protection of the habitat and the resource. But that doesn't mean excluding people from it. Like, I think there's got to be a reasonable,
Yeah, we can't exclude people from the landscape.
like our wildlife management. I think that
What an
we've done a great job, in this nation. The North American model of wildlife conservation, I think, is a great success story. And if we could maybe model our efforts with plant harvesting after that, but like you said, that's going to take a lot of resources.
And the
And I don't know how you build the framework for that from the ground up. I have no idea, because as of now, there really isn't much of one. Except for, there's some species specific laws like the balsam tip.
which is what it would
permit
have to become. The problem is it's ad infinitum, because it's not like with animals. It's like, okay, there's only so many species that people realistically hunt, and then if you look in the law book, it says any species not listed here is not legal to hunt.
Right.
So you can't do that with plants because the sheer number of medicines and foods, they're
Right.
just almost, they're might as well be infinite and then every state's going to be a little different. And the other thing that really occurs to me is how much this requires the participation of landowners.
Yeah.
In a way, hunting it's just more passive. It's for the landowner, but this becomes like, it's like different when you have like a group of people coming through, weeding up what you perceive to be weeding up your backyard.
Yeah.
That's a little different than, hey, I might cross through here and at worst you're going to find a shotgun shell. That's different than you walk out in your backyard and there's like a bunch of hippies back there with like snips.
Your whole understory is gone.
It's like cleared.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and what scares me though, cause you said a minute ago, you said, something like, oh, I don't know, like if I'm qualified to say this or like I'm not sure, like who is anyone else thinking about it? That's what scares me.
Well, it's obviously being thought about because there was some rule changes proposed a couple years ago, like you said, and I think that those were mainly focused on mushrooms and fiddleheads. Maybe ramps were in there too, but I didn't hear any of the language talking to foraging as
They were
whole.
using the term for that particular piece of legislation I was talking about was foraging specific. And what scared me about it is it wasn't species specific. So it was like, imagine if it was
just
like
a blanket statement.
Imagine if there was an issue with squirrel hunting and so they decided to ban hunting. You know what I mean? And because of that wall of green, because everybody can easily, if I put a squirrel, a raccoon, a deer, a bear, and a moose in a room, everybody can kind of knows what those are. And if one walks out in front of your car, it's pretty obvious what you're seeing, and everybody gets that. But when it comes to plants, most people can't distinguish them.
We have state wildlife biologists assigned to each of those animal species, whereas the resources that it would take to do that in the plant world, it would be insane.
So again, what scares me about this is that you have... try to think of an example where you have some massive issue that humanity faces and it falls on the shoulders of one man or woman to be the one to be like, okay, I guess I'm taking this problem on.
In Maine, it would have to be Arthur.
Yeah, well, in the country, it has to be basically us, like those of us who are involved in this. It's falling on. We're the ones having the conversation, and the world's not having this conversation. Yeah, like in Maine, like Arthur would be the one who could come up with the framework for the management plan.
Yeah,
there's no way it could be a federal thing, though. It'd like have to be area by area.
I bet you it would. I bet you they would do a mix because you know how it is with animals. It's like you're right. Mostly, I bet like 90%. But you know how you have like squirrel here is managed by the state, deer here is managed by the state, but the lynx, the Canada lynx, waterfowl. In other migratory birds too, like snipe and
how would that come into
woodcock,
play?
they're federally regulated. So the only thing the state's allowed to do here with, let's say, the Canada lynx, well, no, they're endangered species list, so that's federal. They're off limits. But let's say something like woodcock, which is a migratory bird, the state's only allowed to further restrict. They can't make it more lenient than the federal rule. So you could imagine something like ginseng, I bet, would be one of those things that might end up under a federal regulation at some point, American ginseng or something like that, whereas other plants would be... And then you run into this other awkward stuff, like what about apples, like feral apples? They're not native, Japanese knotweed, not native to the landscape, highly invasive, right? And then used by some people as food and medicine. So do we create... You know how they used to do back in the day? It would be like... You turn in a coyote hide and there was a bounty for every hide that you turned in, or, the heads of animals or whatever it is that they give you a bounty for. Could we have that kind of a thing where it's like for every bushel of Japanese knotweed root you bring in, you get some kind of stipend for that or whatever. I mean, it's just a really fascinating thing because, again, it's not really being talked about, and foraging is getting popular.
Yep.
And all of us are working on things that are making it more popular.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it being regulated. I think that a responsible management plan is probably long overdue.
It's almost like it would have to be...
We're probably behind the ball. Like, I think that
we are.
if anything, if it's going to happen now, it's going to be reactionary.
That's what I'm worried about.
And it's going to be... if you're doing things reactionarily, then it's probably going to be an unreasonable response. You know what
Especially
I mean?
people with no... Because another thing that I think's happened is you have a lot of politicians who have some family heritage, who are involved in hunting legislation, who are either hunters or at least grew up around some, or have comparatively, very few people have any kind of... Like you grew up with a mom who's an herbalist, so it gives you some kind of like link back. But most people who are in politics don't have a link back to plant foraging.
Yeah.
And you know how if you say to people, this has really been interesting to me. And one of the things I respect about BHA is like this, Ranella is like this, that whole clique, the folks that hunt to eat, the hunting collective, that whole community of people have really dialed in the idea that if we promote our hunting from the perspective of food acquisition, the public becomes very receptive to something that they're otherwise closed off to.
Yeah.
When I hunt in North Carolina for bear, these guys push the heritage idea. This is our family's heritage. And the public does not care about that. They're like, so what? It's gross what you're doing. We don't like it. And I don't care how long you did it. You know, it's like there's tons of family heritage around female genital mutilation. It's not something people feel good about. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Well, we were slavers forever. It's like, no one cares, dude. It's not cool now. So, but the food piece,
that's universal.
People get it. And a lot of people, I have a lot of vegans say to me, I'm sure you've heard this, where they go, I don't really, it's not for me, but I respect what you do. Because if you're going to do it, you're doing it the right way. Now, when you start talking about the plant component, a lot of people, instead, you don't hear, I don't ever say like, I harvest deer and people go, why? You can just go to the supermarket and get beef. But if I say,
I hear that all the time.
Okay, I don't get that as much. But when I say like I harvest wild rice, people are like, dude, rice is like 99 cents a pound. Why would you go through the effort when you can just buy it? Yeah. And I think a lot of times with plants, people's attitude is like, it's like, get out of the past, man. We have broccoli now.
It's a lot of work for some rice.
It's a lot of work for some rice. Exactly. So I feel like it's just going to be a hard one because a lot of politicians would see it like that. Like, they don't need to be doing this.
And a lot of people, I think, have that like that inherent sort of hands-off human guilt that I was talking about feeling too. So they're feeling like that's a negative impact on
especially
the landscape.
This generation as a voting base.
It can be if it's not done right,
But it's an interesting component would be that if we had something like, let's say you had to buy a foraging license every year, right? So your super pack goes up $75 or something or whatever. You get this foraging license. In the way that hunting license money pays for wildlife management, what would be nice is if we could fund sane and rational
science-based management, not emotion-based.
Right. Yep. And I would like to see Monsanto not involved in like the management of non-native species. For instance, like, I always just thought like that the landscape restoration stuff was great. Like, oh yeah, they're getting rid of invasive plants. And then I found out, the way they do that is they spray Roundup Ready on everything. It's like, well, I'd rather have invasive plants around than have Roundup Ready on the soil that I forage. So it would be cool if we could restore, at least starting, say, with public land through the money that we could take in from foraging licenses. Yeah. We're cooking up a scheme right here. I'm liking where this is headed.
I love it. And honestly, like for me, I'm a rule follower. So like the way that I've been living since I've been foraging for my food, sometimes it makes me uncomfortable because there's so much gray area.
Yeah, I saw.
You know what I mean? Because there's no clear rules for me to be following. And that's what I want to be doing. I want to be following your rules. Like, give me a framework and I'm happy to abide by it if it's reasonable. And I do think that the way that we manage our wildlife is reasonable, and I'm perfectly happy.
Even when it's annoying, in the back of my head, I'm like, this is
it's the right thing. It's the good.
Or even when I feel like I shouldn't have to abide by this law, like I'm going to eat this thing. It's like, it is, I'm really glad that they're in place.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing, I do bump into a lot is I really want to be able to snare snowshoe hare on my land.
Okay, now you're wait a second. You're right.
I really want to be able to do that, but I can't.
Now that you're bringing it up, okay. All right. I like to spearfish.
No.
And we can't spearfish game, so I have to spearfish species that are unregulated in Maine, and there's only a few that I can do. But off on the coast, I'm talking about. So I spearfish. I started spearfishing this year, so I'm not really experienced with it here. But I started spearfishing this year for tog, cunner, and flounder with a guy that I met out of Portland, Maine.
Neat.
So that's something that I would love to see open up. Yeah. Arthur wrote me the other day, all excited about the idea of spearing pike through the ice because it's popular. No, you can't. Around the country, you can. But here, for some reason, even in waters where pike are introduced and they're a problem, we can't do that. So dark house spearing, where you black out the ice house. I want to
do it so bad.
Yeah, it's so cool, right? But yeah.
What about New Hampshire? Can you do New Hampshire?
That's a good question.
I don't know.
Let's find out because
Okay.
it would be really cool. I want to just own one of those giant gigs. Those are so cool. So there are a lot of things like that where I think the state's a little behind in opening some things up. I think we should have a dove harvest, even with a small.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't.
That's
Why
another
isn't
one.
there? Why? Why not?
I'm not sure.
It doesn't seem to me that the population's small. I
No.
see mourning doves everywhere, and anybody who's got a field of seed, wow, you can bump big flocks of them out. Maybe not like you can in North Carolina or Georgia or Tennessee or something, but we do have plenty here. Like you could have a 2 or 3 bird a day bag limit, no problem. That would be great.
Yeah.
Any others that come to mind?
Blue jay?
Not on the top of my list of desires, but no. Honestly, I don't disagree.
Why do you
with-
want to snare snowshoe hares?
Oh, because
Just
I
'cause
think
it's
it's a
cool.
cool skill.
Yeah.
It's a skill that I would like to have, and I can't practice it because it's illegal.
It's
You know what
weird
I mean?
how the trapping thing you can't. Like if you want to, okay, back to what kind of where we're at. If you want to do muzzle loader, right? Your husband today,
Yeah.
muzzle loader out for deer.
Yeah.
In other words, an antiquated weapon is still allowed for those who want to use it, or you can hunt with a longbow here. And I'm sure you've heard this in a lot of European countries. Bow hunting is illegal; it's considered
You can
unethical.
hunt with a longbow?
Yeah.
Like
Stick bow?
a deer with a longbow?
Of course.
Like an old school Peter Pan style bow.
Yeah.
But you can't, but like,
There's draw weight regulations.
Yeah.
okay.
What's
Yeah.
the
But you
minimum?
can't hunt a
Like,
deer with like a small caliber
No.
rifle.
No. Well, you were getting into some interesting points here. One thing I want to bring up is the story that I know I keep talking about. Arthur's he's just my guy.
Hey, you picked a good one. If you're gonna pick any guy, it should be. You have good taste.
Thank you. I love his flowing curly lock. We have this joke about this time he was in some kind of, I don't know if it was an archery shop or something, and he had brought in a stone point that he had napped. And I mean, if you ever have messed with a stone napped arrow points, like all of our ancestors used, they're remarkably sharp. Any of the flint-like, glass-like stones, they produce remarkably sharp edges. But they're also like, they remind me of the serrations on like a Spyderco knife or something, like a gnarly serrated knife with different
Cool.
size serrations, because the whole edge is serrated from the way that it's napped. And you can imagine, if you understand the ballistics of archery, well, the way that archery kills is through bleeding. And so, if you put I would way rather be cut with a clean edged knife than with a serrated knife. And that's a lot of individual cuts to try to close up. So this worked the reason we're here is because people hunted with these arrow points, right? So he's in this shop and he's handed the guy who runs the shop this arrowhead, and another guy comes in and Arthur's off doing something and he overhears this conversation where the shop owner says, "Hey, check this out." And the guy's holding it and he goes, "You think that would kill a deer?" And it's like, dude, you don't have to be an anthropologist, but yeah, that would kill a deer. That's how we got here. Is like,
Yeah.
those are how we killed deer.
Tried and true.
It's like pretty much, for millions of years. So anyway, I just think that's really interesting. But yeah, you can hunt here with a longbow. You can hunt with a recurve bow. Mm-hmm. You can muzzle load. But if you're somebody who's into the art of trapping, which is this like diminishing activity, of course, you can't practice you can't use deadfall traps. You can't use snare traps. And these are very effective traps. And they're certainly not any less humane. I mean, I don't think a leg hold trap's any more humane than a snare trap. It's the same thing. You're caught by the leg until somebody comes around. So it's weird how you can't practice I'm going to wrap it all bow on it now. You can't practice the heritage or ancestral skill of trapping the way you can with hunting and fishing. Nobody regulates you if you want to go pick like milkweed stalks and spin up your own cordage and make like a bone, hook and go out, and there's no rule against that, but you can't snare snowshoe hare on your property.
Not like, I just want to be able to do it once. You know what I mean? It's not
We
like,
won't tell anybody.
You can snare bear on your property though.
really?
Yeah. That's what's weird is like you can set snares for black bear.
And I understand why they're doing it, because the snare is, not always discriminate, and they're worried about catching lynx or snowshoe. Or cottontail, rather.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, yeah, I get it.
Another rule I wanted to talk about. I saw on your Instagram the other day that you saw a deer out in your yard. You went out to sneak sneak out to get it. Then you're like, oh, I don't have my orange on.
Yeah.
So you went back inside.
Yeah.
get your
Rule
orange,
follower.
And by the time you're out there, what do you think about hunter orange?
Wow, you're definitely a rule follower.
I am to a
On
fault.
your own land. On your own land, right?
To a fault. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, I don't know a lot of people who have that level. I know some non-rule followers, and the things that these people do and how vociferous, is that the right word? They talk about it a lot.
I don't know.
How locucious they
It's
are about it.
shocking.
Out in public, they're out at the bar like, oh yeah, I poached this big old 10-point this morning, and you're like,
I think
whoa.
a lot of poachers are caught because they post it on Facebook.
It's true.
They
That's
give no
one of the
shits.
ways they get caught.
Yeah.
Yep, that's one of the ways
Yeah.
they get caught.
So what are your thoughts on hunter orange?
I'm fine with it. I don't want to get shot. I don't want to shoot somebody else. I think it probably makes the woods a safer place during rifle season. I'm okay with it.
For those who don't know, that New Hampshire, next door to us, has a license plate slogan that says "Live free or die," which I think is tight. I was born there. I always thought that was really tight. You don't have to wear hunter orange there.
Right. They recommend it.
They recommend it,
They don't
right?
mandate.
I love that. We highly recommend. In Maine, you must wear, so your torso must be covered in a garment. So usually that means at least a vest, and that vest must be 50% orange. So which is just to allow camouflaging if you want to have some streaks on it or whatever. And then your hat must be all orange, can have a logo, but you have to have a head cover as well. So that's 2 articles of hunter orange. And they're highly regulated about what the wavelength of that actual orange is and how it refracts light and all of that. I did read an article recently. I was telling you about tree stand falls and accidents, and they were sort of listing the causes of accidents and how prevalent they are, and how there's really been no reduction in falls. But they were contrasting that with hunters being shot by other hunters, and saying that hunter orange laws have dramatically reduced that. So that used to be your chances of getting shot
before
were much
hunter
higher.
orange, hunters were getting shot.
Why do people just shoot off into the, something moves or you can't? I just would not ever be so indiscriminate about shooting at things. It seems so stupid, but
You would think there would be some caution
I know
with a weapon of
I know
that
3
caliber.
people
But
who've been shot hunting.
Really?
really,
I was going to say, my hunter safety course was not that thorough about being careful.
really,
I mean, it was pretty, but it's like you especially I know you, Daniel, out in the with a rifle, you're very trained. You're not most people are like that.
Yeah, 6 years in a shooting school. It's
Yeah.
that's the thing is that is a little bit scary. It's like if you don't have good fundamentals with a rifle, but also but then think about us the other day. So we shoot this little deer, on an any deer tag, we shoot this little button buck, and we're in a depression in a power line, so it's like a swamp. It's filled with water and it's raining all day, and I carry it out on my shoulders, which we put in the show.
Right.
And we're going to catch some serious flack from people who are like, dude, you're walking around with a
you
deer
didn't put
on your
orange
shoulders.
on the deer,
No, I had orange on me.
but not on the deer.
I
Not on the
I
deer.
didn't even think of that.
I didn't either. I was just like, I have to carry this thing out of this hole. Now,
I was like, this is going to look great on camera.
yeah, but we're going to catch a lot of flack for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so anyway, there's things like that you don't think of, dragon. Or I always think about people who go out with actual sets of antlers to rattle.
Yeah.
Nice,
Call in
nice
other
big,
hunters?
Yeah, big 5-point, in each hand.
Yeah,
And it's
man.
like you're just standing out there shaking those things around. It's like, yikes. Yeah, exactly. Or turkey season, man. When I do those fan
More
reaps,
people get shot during turkey season than any other season.
I'd rather take
Luckily,
pellets
it's
than a
probably not lethal,
308.
right? It's
Yeah.
birdshot, but still,
But pretty heavy shot that you're using, man, I wouldn't want to.
no.
I wouldn't want a face.
It'll
full of that.
stick.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I guess the orange thing is, but I do find it awkward. Like right now, I want to be squirrel hunting,
Yeah.
but I just wait till muzzleloader's over because
So then
in
you
order
can
to
wear your
squirrel hunt,
camo.
you have to wear.
Yeah.
I just.
I
for
don't
me, it's-
love wearing it, but I
very
get
much.
it.
Do you think you should have been allowed to get that deer on your own property without orange?
Oh, that's an interesting
It's a
exemption.
good question. I don't
That would be
know. I wouldn't be opposed to a landowner exemption, but my land's not posted, so there might be other hunters on my land. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then again, what's interesting is if you're doing archery, you're exempted from that.
Right.
And if you're
really?
if you're waterfowling, in a blind, you are exempt, and maybe from a boat too. You're exempt. I can't remember that part exactly, but you're exempt from hunter orange once you're in the blind. And then also, because the law is during any open firearm season to include muzzle loader on deer,
Yeah.
you must wear orange if you're carrying a rifle in the woods. So it doesn't matter if you're hunting something else. So, but bow hunters are exempt from that, which full respect for bow hunters. I get why they would want to be exempt from that. But what gets interesting to me here is if deer can't see orange, then why do bow hunters care if they don't have to wear orange?
I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I've been messing around with a lot lately is I have a couple of ultraviolet flashlights.
Oh, really?
And I originally got them because I was fascinated with what would happen if you look on the wall when you go into a hotel room. It's really, really gross. Everything.
Did you find any secret messages?
None that were spelled out in English.
But there was a tale told.
As somebody who dabbles in a little tracking, you could follow the trail. And most everything, the trail begins at the bed. And
I've heard the
ends
curtains are the
everywhere
worst.
else. Oh, man.
Because they don't clean the curtains.
You know what is really the worst is the wall around a toilet.
Ooh.
Because there's just a lot of spray back. Yeah. Anyway, recently I decided to take my lights and start looking at, because deer see pretty well in ultraviolet. So I start looking at gear that I have with ultraviolet to see what reflects it. And surprising amount of gear reflects ultraviolet light. Your
camo stuff.
A lot of it will. And then two issues. One is it can be embedded in the fabrics.
Yeah.
And a lot of reason that some of the camos are so incredibly bright and brilliant and 3D looking is UV brighteners. Less now, though. I think they're starting to realize this. But also a lot of soap, a lot of detergents have UV brighteners that add it, right? So I think if it's in your fabric, you're never getting it out. If you have it in your soap, you can kind of eventually wash that out. But regardless, in order to get that incredible brightness in hunter orange, it's incredibly reflective of ultraviolet light. So my thinking is that deer can't probably see that color. I don't argue with the science on that, but I would be surprised if at dawn and dusk, if they don't see ultraviolet reflecting off of you. And if in fact they don't, then why would bow hunters be exempt?
Yeah.
Maybe they only see it at a certain yardage, or maybe at far away, there's enough stuff in the landscape that we were hunting in the snow and we thought we were super slick this year. I got white sheets and I set up these really cool blinds. I mean, it was really cool looking, right? It looked like, it'd be like cool in a movie, like a war movie or something, or like some Navy SEAL movie. We did see some deer doing it, but that deer sure had her head cranked around looking over in our direction a lot. And she was several hundred yards out and not winding us. So I was starting to think, were we like a big reflective sign there? Because all that white snow camo, it's highly reflective. That's why it's so brilliantly white. But then snow is reflective of it.
Yeah.
So then I start thinking like, okay, maybe lots in the landscape's reflecting that, and that's not a big deal. But certainly if you're in a tree reflecting ultraviolet light, that's a big deal. So I just wonder why bow hunters should be exempt, because they're walking through the woods like everybody else.
Yeah.
Why would they not get shot at?
Or just hikers. Not like you can't force somebody just to wear orange.
That's a good point.
It's like if you enter the woods,
but I think with hikers, they're going, well, look, listen. I mean, all of that hunting stuff, all that camping stuff is fluorescent colors anyway, so it's a big deal. They're fine. You can't go into a mountain equipment store and not find something that's fluorescent.
Yeah.
Well, okay. How do we wrap a bow on all this? Tie it around. Bring it around.
Follow those rules.
Follow those rules.
Follow those rules, kids. Well, I mean, I'm annoyed with myself at how much of a rule follower I am. I'm not.
You might have a deer in the freezer right now if you weren't.
I definitely would.
That would be a hard one, because that's what is that thing they talk about? They say that like ethics are
what you do when nobody's watching.
There. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess somebody's watching if you post a story about it, but but still, it's impressive, because it would be really easy for you to shoot that deer and
throw on some orange.
You don't even have to throw an orange. You're in your own yard. You know what I mean? No one's ever going to know. But yeah, you could just be like, oh yeah, I had my orange on when you pose for my photo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that it's not even that I think that the majority of other hunters in my situation would have taken that shot. And I wouldn't have thought less of them for doing it. You know what I mean? I think my rule following mostly comes from like a fear of getting caught. You know what I mean?
Which is smart, actually.
Very small chance that I would have gotten caught for that, but just that fear is enough to stop me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you don't want one of the
And I respect the rules. I respect our, our wildlife biologists and our game wardens. I think they do a great job.
I really respect our game wardens, and man, they are undersung, I think. And I think I haven't watched Northwoods Law, so I can't really speak to that. But I feel like from what I hear people talking about it, so I probably shouldn't even comment because I don't know enough about the show. But I worry that it gives the wrong impression. That
I've seen a few episodes.
Okay, I just get the impression from people that it's like the wardens are out to get you, bad boys, that like it's a cop show or whatever. But the wardens that I've interacted with, I really respect. Now, one thing I'll say is when they run your name, you don't want them like running your name and it's like, oh, here we have a Hunter Orange violation. You were ticketed in 2008, and here we go again. You were caught over your limit of fish that day, and we had to seize them. Or God forbid you have a deer poaching. I mean, that's like lose your truck, lose your gun, lose anything you've used. That's very serious stuff. So, you don't want them running your name. I remember I've realized that I had a warden come to the house one time about some turkey carcasses I'd discarded, and I've discarded them on my own land, but somebody called the warden on me, and he came and he was like, "Oh, I see you have a permit to hunt with a suppressor." And I was like, "Oh," he looks up my name and all your stuff is there. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's like,
what else?
You hunt
with
a suppressor?
Yeah, I do.
For what?
Well, deer this year.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, I have a suppressed 308, and I have a suppressed 300 blackout, and then I have a suppressed 22.
Neat.
As well, but that's one of the opportunities. And Maine requires you to have a suppressor permit.
Yeah. But
the rest of the country, I think, how many states is it now? It's the majority of states allow you to hunt with a suppressor without any permit. Maine is, I think, probably the only state. I think it's the only state that requires, don't quote me on this, but I think it's the only state that allows suppressor hunting that requires any permitting for it, which was, I think, just a background check to make sure you haven't been a poacher before. They don't want poachers using suppressors.
Right.
And most people don't understand suppressors. So
can you use it on a sidearm?
Yeah. I don't
like
have
a handgun.
I don't have a suppressor for any of my handguns, but if you're legal to hunt
because something
that
I've fantasized about is being able to hunt squirrel or grouse with a 22 with a suppressor while I'm out for deer.
That would be great. I think about that all the time too, actually.
I would clean up.
I carry a lot of times 2 guns, and it's so awkward. Like I'll either have a 22 and a shotgun during fall turkey, because I'll squirrel hunt.
You carry both?
Yeah, because I'd like to shoot squirrels with 22s, and
yeah, man, it's a daily battle for me during those seasons. I'm like, which one do I bring?
Oh, yeah, I'll carry both.
I'll
put my shotgun on my back because it's light, and I'll carry my 22 because I can't shoot the turkeys with 22s legally. And then during the deer season, sometimes this is crazy, but sometimes I have 3 guns because Avani was a professional paddler. She's a pro paddler.
Cool.
And we'll paddle down the rivers, and I'll have a 22 for squirrels. I'll have a shotgun for waterfowl. And if it's during deer season, I'll have a rifle. So, and it gets confusing. I had this thing that last year on the last day of deer season, last day of rifle season, we pulled the canoe over to this real oaky spot. And the banks were down like 10 feet. So I go up over the bank with my 22 because I'm like, there's going to be some squirrels right in there. Come right up over, and there's this 6-point buck. He's just looking at me at like 25 yards, and I just slink back, and I'm like, I'm gonna go get my other rifle now. And when I came up, he's like at 150 yards, darting through trees. But so I've learned it's like, okay, when you get out of the boat, bring the big gun, because the squirrels will be there. You can go back and get the other gun. Yeah. But yeah, I know. So a pistol would be really cool. Yeah, I don't think that you'd have any issues with a suppressed 22 pistol.
Cool.
Just the cumbersomeness of having that, but it's not much. They're light suppressors on a 22. So rules, I guess, is really what this all ended up being about, and what the rules should be, and what kind of rules we need. No, this is a fascinating conversation, cool. Actually. I think we've ranged over some really good stuff, and I think it's stuff people really need to be thinking about. Coming back to the plant thing, I mean, this is going to have to get sorted out. This is like one of those problems. It's like, that's what I'm saying before. It's like, it's got to be a little scary when you're the one you're looking out at the thing going like, oh, there's a problem looming. And you're like, there must be some experts dealing with this. And then you're like, they're not. Yeah. You're the experts. Yeah. Like, it falls on us who do this stuff now. So Whereas I think when people come into hunting, looking back, I really, it's so embarrassing and funny when I look back at when I went and got my hunter safety course done. This was many years before I got serious about hunting. I didn't even understand that there was like seasons, laws.
That's what I was about to say, is that like for a lot of your listeners that might not be hunters, I know that a lot of times when I'm talking to non-hunters, like even people in my family who've, obviously known me my whole life and known me my whole hunting life, are still surprised to hear like there's a season for squirrels. Like you can't just go out and shoot shit all the time. Mm-hmm. So they're not aware that there is like very thoughtful regulations.
Or that you
put
need
in place.
A hunting license even to shoot a squirrel. Like a lot
right,
of people
and that
just assume you can just do that.
And that those regulations are changing all of the time, based on science-based decisions with
often season to
with
season.
the well-being of the animals in mind.
Yeah, great point.
So I think that's a thing that I find myself explaining to non-hunters quite a bit.
I want to ask you in a second, like where you get people started, but first I want to say that we were just writing for the show about this, talking about roadkill, and I realized like I should probably mention you can't just pick up roadkill in most states.
Yeah. I just met my sheriff the other night because I brought home a roadkill turkey and he had to come by and
tag it for you, right? You actually need a tag. And so, I'm on the roadkill list here, and I always have to go meet some kind of officer, whether it's a warden or a county deputy or a local cop. But, then I have this collection of roadkill tags in my garage because at any time, if the warden was like, I'm looking in your freezers, I need to be able to account for all the meat that's in there, and some of them are from roadkill, so I keep those tags. But now I have this massive jar. It's just like filled with all these tags. And I think people just assume, and I worry sometimes that I mention something about like, oh yeah, if you get a fresh roadkill deer, especially one struck in the head or something, it's as good as if you just shot it, just died, bring it home. And then I worry about people scooping them up and putting them in the car, not realizing they need to make a phone call first. And so... yeah, it's an interesting point. So let's wrap it up with this. I want to ask you about what you were just talking about. For people listening who are, let's say they already plant forage, that world's a little different. It's like, I'm just going to go take some workshops from somebody like Sam Thayer, somebody like Arthur Haynes, somebody like you, where it's like, I'm just going to go start with somebody with experience and go learn how to get started foraging. But when you're like, I want to start hunting, and you start Googling around like, oh, hunting workshops, it's very, very little of that. And
BHA is doing some cool ones.
Yeah, well, like talk about that, because I was seeing the BHA was like a hunter mentoring.
Yep, we just started that program this year.
Tell people about that.
Cool, it's brand new. And I don't know about the other chapters in the country, but as far as the New England chapter here,
which is, tell people what states. A lot of people, when you go like, oh yeah, I'm from New England, in California, I'm from New England. Like, funny, you don't have an English accent. It's like, oh man,
really?
Oh yeah, Los Angeles. Oh yeah, I've heard that more than once.
New England, let's see, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. I think that's it.
I think that's it.
So yeah. And
all those states are included in that chapter.
At some point, as membership keeps growing, those will probably divide up into individual states, or maybe northern New England, southern New England. But as of now, it's all one. But we did just start a mentor program this year that is pretty low key at this point, but I think is a good introductory program for people who want to start hunting and don't know where to start. So as of now, what it looks like is we compiled a database of our members who were willing to be mentors in whatever skill set they felt like they were experienced enough to offer. So everything from, big game hunting down to fly fishing to foraging, whatever they have to offer in the outdoors, or like backcountry canoeing, or it's not just hunting and fishing.
Oh, that's great.
All the outdoor skills.
Stuff, yeah. Of which it's wise to get a broad range of things, right? I mean, those things all feed back into each other.
Well.
Yeah, like your skill set is much more well-rounded the more of those things you do.
Backcountry navigating. Things
crucial
like
stuff. Stuff you can take for granted if you didn't have that stuff. And I did a lot of that stuff because I was training in the tactical world, and I learned a lot of that stuff. Did a lot of navigation workshops as an example. And it's easy to take that for granted that I have that when I started hunting, because if I had come to it without that, it'd be a much slower process.
Yeah.
getting out there.
Yeah, there's a ton of hurdles or a ton of things that
like
might
Boy
be
Scout badges
daunting.
that you kind of need to get.
Firearm
right?
skills.
Yeah, which is huge. And the understanding ballistics and
Yep.
all that. I mean, that's a complicated game.
Yeah,
even
so
for
we have a
experts.
database of members now who have offered their experience in the form of mentorship. And then we sort of sent out an invitation for people who are looking for mentors or looking to gain experience. Like, even if they're already experienced in one field, maybe they want to learn more
somebody
about
behind the
another
scenes
field.
pairing them up or something. Oh, it's like a
Little matchmaking.
dating database kind of thing. Yeah, online dating.
Yeah. Originally, I had thought that maybe the best format would be to have the list of mentors and then just make that available to people looking for mentors. But we thought that maybe we should sort of curate it a little more for the first season and see how it goes.
Makes sense.
So at the end of this hunting season, we'll, do like a follow-up survey or
See how it
touch
went.
in with everyone and see
Yeah.
how we need to tweak it. And, we've talked to, I'm going to forget what the 3 R's are in the R3 program. Do you know what they are?
Oh boy.
Recruit,
recruit,
reactivate,
retain, or
retain,
something? Yeah.
recruit, retain, reactivate.
Yeah. In other words, recruit new hunters.
Yes.
Retain the hunters that you already have.
Yeah.
Reactivate the ones who've
Fallen
held
off.
licenses in the past and
Yeah.
fell off.
Which I think Maine now has a brand new R3 coordinator, and we've talked to her about the program. And so hopefully, after we work out some kinks within our membership, hopefully that we'll be able to present that to the public at large and have it not just be for BHA members. Of course, we want everybody to be BHA members.
Of course,
but
but it should go broader.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So we're talking about, presenting it at hunter safety courses throughout the state and things like that to not only offer like the nuts and bolts skills, but also our ethic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Because I think that's a big factor in perpetuating hunting.
Yeah, especially at a time where there's new technologies, for an example, like drones with cameras. Like
we put the kibosh on that.
Yeah, that presents so there's all these new issues with ethics. There's fair chase ethical questions and a lot of difficult questions as the world becomes more civilized that need some moral compass.
Yeah.
Kind of somebody operating out there holding the moral compass. So that's really cool. What about the what do you call the rendezvous and the gatherings that happen? Talk a little bit about that too for people who are, 'cause I have never gone to one, and I see,
They're fun.
I'm really man, I'm so antisocial. It's like,
You're not though.
as long as it's one person at a time, I'm great. But I see, I'll get these emails like, hey, everybody's getting together for beers and wild steaks or whatever at some place. And
I'm not a social person.
Oh, you don't do it either? Oh,
no,
good.
I do because now I'm in the position, I'm on
No,
the board.
I must.
I'm making these things happen.
I set that one up, Daniel. I had to do that. It's at my house.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, that tends to be a common thread within outdoorsmen is a lot of us are not social creatures. We like to be in the woods by ourselves.
Right.
But if it's the right crowd,
Yeah, exactly.
you find your people.
That's
and
when you come home, you're like, honey, I had a really good time.
Dude,
I gotta say, I need to do that more. I need
like
to do this
these
more.
people.
Yeah.
I
Some
find
really good people there.
you're like verbatim
Funny,
when
yeah.
I come home from these things.
Yeah.
And my husband just kind of like shakes his head. He's like, yeah, you said that last time too. But then leading up to
and then you stayed
it.
in the house for 364
Yep.
days.
No, but I mean, camaraderie is it's a
very
real
important.
thing. Sense of community is a real thing. And I think that it's easy to get away from, and it's easy to think that you're supplanting that with your online community, and that has a place and it has a value.
And having
but
a mentor
it's
is
not
very
the same.
important too.
Yeah.
Man, that piece right there, because we know, and I'm sure you know, some people who want to start hunting, they get a bunch of gear, they get their weapons, they do all this stuff, they go to the class, they refuse to find a mentor, and then you watch them struggle for year after year after year, and it's like,
That was me.
oh, did you do that?
Oh yeah.
I kind of did that. When I got.
I like to be
Daniel
alone.
took me out and
Some
got
of
my,
this-
I got my first turkeys this year, But before I let him take me out, I tried to go out myself, and I was like, I'm gonna send him a picture of these turkeys. I had like all the wrong stuff, you know.
I won't.
See, we don't have to go into detail.
We don't have to talk about the gun that he brought with him and what he was trying to accomplish.
Oh no.
And we don't have to talk about when I took the shotgun shells out of your gun and I said, "What are these now?" But anyway, so we've seen that a lot, and and that same propensity to want to be alone is one reason people won't reach out. Now, I think from years of being in like doing the podcast thing, I learned like find the people who know the thing you don't know, and then ask them every question you can ask them. And man, I mean, I started bear hunting from a guy I met at a gas station. Why I'm bringing this up is to say, when you get around other people who share this passion, what's amazing is I would guess if you went to one of these meetings, by the time you leave, you're like, well, I'm going fishing with that guy, and we're going to do this, and he's got this land.
It's like you can go and like I've asked you a ton of stuff, like picked your brain a ton, but it's like I want to go out there and do it myself. You know, I want to go get it and then show them or like show everybody. But it's important to go out there with those people that you meet,
because you can't. It's so hard to learn these skills, and it's okay. I taught myself a lot of foraging with books.
Yeah,
it's different, and you almost start to wonder, like as a reader, I always wonder why there aren't better books on how to. There's great hunting fishing memoir books. There's not really good how-to books. I appreciate what Ranella and Putelis did with those 2 encyclopedia books they made.
Yeah, they're great.
Because that's the most modern version of a concise, but still it's like you can only tell somebody so much. You have to go, because every landscape's different, the habits of animals in different places are different, and ultimately so I feel real confident that every year I get turkeys because I went out with guys who did not quit till I got my turkeys. Deer's been way more challenging for me because I haven't had people hold my hand through the whole process as effectively. So I still have a lot of gaps in the knowledge, and I'm figuring it out, and I've been able to get deer, but like I'm not cocky about getting deer. Mm-hmm. I'm just not confident about it. In Maine, I feel real confident about it when I go down to North Carolina and there's corn on the ground everywhere. But
infinite tags.
Here, exactly. But here it's very difficult. So I just think that's so crucial. And I was thinking about the other day, I was visiting a friend who owns a restaurant, and I was talking about seal hunting with him. I was just talking about something going on up in Canada, and a guy across the way goes, "Did you say seal hunting?" You know, I was kind of like, "Oh no, I got to turn my head like I'm picturing as I turn my head, it's going to be like Bernie Sanders or something." You know? But I look, and sorry, I don't know why I look, and the guy's like starts chatting me about hunting, and by the end of this conversation, I'm going to go on his tuna boat. So that kind of thing happens all the time.
All the time.
If you start talking to people before you know it, and that's what you need is someone. I've never fished tuna. No, I fished blackfins and stuff in Florida, but up here I've never tuna fished. So I need somebody to take me out and show me every part of it. I need to see their gear. The worst is like you go buy a bunch of stuff and then you go out with people and you realize you got all the wrong stuff. Oh, it happens. I've done that so many times. There's so many reasons. So I just would think being part of an organization like that is really useful because
it just oh my God, it just snowballs on itself too. I can't tell you how many years of struggling alone I've probably saved myself from joining DHA. The people.
It's so funny.
And, you know, I think another thing that's kind of inherent in outdoorsmen is their desire to share.
Right?
So like the mentor program it's a win-win.
Even the secretive ones, they just want to find the right person to share it with.
They need a protege.
Yeah, they're looking for their protege.
Yeah.
All you got to do is position yourself as the protege.
Yeah. But yeah, they're very willing and generous with sharing what they know, and they want to see especially young or new to the outdoors people succeed, and they want to be a part of that. You know what I mean?
They're it's amazing how good it feels. Like when you got your turkeys this year, and I got to feel like I had a hand in that.
You might have been happier than me.
Yeah.
I was
so great feeling.
Elated. Yeah. It was so good for me to be like, it's that like give a man a fish or teach a man to fish thing. It was like,
oh yeah, man.
You know, it's like you're good.
People who take my classes will like text me photos of meals that they're making, or like how they're taking their kids out, and it's the best. It's the best feeling.
And then, do you guys not also have a thing? I'm thinking back to before the turkey season. Maybe it was this year prior to the opening. there was some opportunity to go into the field in some conservation work, like netting birds and stuff. Was there?
Oh yeah. Well, we also do sort of like habitat stewardship projects where I try to stay in communication with our regional biologists, and so they'll reach out when they have projects that they need help with, like planting shrubs on Scarborough Marsh, or just we've done a bunch of work out on Scarborough Marsh. That's just for this region. And there was a time when we were rocket netting turkeys.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, that was really, because again, that antisocial thing, I was like very close to pressing the trigger on that one. It was like
hard to say no to
rocket
rocket netting
turkeys. We're in a rocket net turkeys. Do you know what that is?
It's like a bazooka or what?
You shoot out a net. Yeah. You got the weighted net.
Kelsey was talking about that.
So we went and spent a day with Kelsey. Do you know Kelsey
Sullivan?
He's Kelsey Sullivan is is Maine's upland and migratory bird specialist.
No, I don't know.
With the state. So we went and he took us out for a day in the field, and we were going to turkey nests to count eggs, hatched eggs, and eggs that were still. Well, no, we only saw hatched eggs.
Yeah, we only
right?
saw hatched eggs.
So anyway, the point being, those kind of things, you might be like, oh, planting shrubs in a marsh, like that sucks. But then you get out there and you realize, oh, why you need to know about those shrubs in that marsh and what that marsh is and how important marsh is. If you're into getting food out of the environment, it's like, this is stuff that's as valuable as getting actually to go and do the hunt or the fishing trip or whatever, because that teaches you all that associated knowledge, because it's not just learning about cottontail rabbits or, it's like learning about everything associated with the habitat and how they use it and all that. So yeah, it just seems like you guys are really offering all, and I also get the impression that BHA is like right at the beginning. It feels like
we're pretty young.
Where it's like it's just starting to unfurl and all the ideas are emerging, and
there's a ton of ideas.
It's going to become it's going to go in a lot of cool directions. So
yeah, and really it'll go in whatever directions our membership see fit, which is the cool part, because there's so many new members, there's so many young members, and all of them are very eager. And then we do have sort of this core group of like older, more experienced, like board members, like Eric Noose and Rob Bryan are two that I can think of on my board, and they've just got a lifetime of experience Eric is a retired game warden, and Rob is a forester, and he used to work for the Audubon Society, and they're just so we're at the point where like our membership is growing so quickly, and everybody is like very young and fiery and eager, but we do have some solid leadership to sort of rein in that energy and like direct it. But yeah, the growth in the membership is kind of explosive and hard to manage. So that's kind of the point of growth that we're at right now, is like working on the framework within the chapter, like setting up, expanding the board, and then
creating enough structure to have it grow. Yeah.
In an organized fashion.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Rather than
I imagine it's a lot to keep up with. Well, on that note, how do more people inundate you? Tell us about how people can get involved with BHA first, and then tell people how they can come work with you on a personal level as well.
Cool. Backcountryhunters.org. And then that's the national website. And from there, the website's pretty easy to navigate. You can see what we're up to on a national scale. And then you can, find our chapter. There's a little map there on the main page where you can, wherever you're listening from, click on your state, find your local chapter. I don't know how many chapters we have now, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find a state without one. Right? Yeah. And if there's not a chapter and you're interested in forming one, do it. I'm sure that you can find other people who are interested, and the national employees they're very accommodating, and they'll help you set up a new chapter if there isn't one already. Cool. So yeah, backcountryhunters.org. We've got, what do we have on the event horizon? Well, we make a point to kind of take a break during hunting season. So we don't really have any events going on right now. But generally, we're going to have something going on, whether it be a pint night or we're talking about a chapter-wide rendezvous for this upcoming year. We haven't decided on the location yet, but we'll try to make it somewhere central. And then as far as me, you can find me on
Well, you're pretty active on Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram is pretty much it. And then Facebook as well.
What's your name on Instagram?
Jenna Rozelle, JennaRozelle. Same thing.
At.
At
Yes,
Jenna
at.
What's that symbol called? It's just called at.
Yeah.
No.
You know, like some things have like ampersand.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Something
that's the one I was
that.
going to say.
That's but at. I think it's just at. Anyway, at Jenna Rozelle.
Yeah.
And you're active there. You comment there too? You like reply to people and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Comments? Yeah, cool.
I try to. I mean, maybe not everyone, but
Is
yeah.
that the best place for someone to reach out about? doing a class?
Instagram, yeah, that's
cool.
that's where I'm most active. I mean, my life is I don't know. I like taking pictures, and Instagram is an
you
easy
got a nice feed.
format for
Yeah,
that,
you
and yeah. So everything that I share on Instagram, I link it to Facebook as well. So
Right.
it's
But
pretty
you're
much
more
it's
on
the same content.
But you're on the gram. I'm that way too. It's
Yeah.
like everything goes over to Facebook, but like I'm commenting and replying and being more personal on Instagram too.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks for sitting down with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really good to
Thanks
get to
for
meet you.
being a BHA member.
Yeah, well.
Are you?
Yeah, of course.
I'm not, but I will be. I will be
Tonight?
after this conversation.
He's a rebel right here. You might want to follow him to a
I
computer.
don't follow those rules like you do.
That is true.
I admire you for that.
Cool. Well, yeah, no, appreciate you coming out. Good to meet you, and I hope that you'll continue to be involved in the WildFed project because it's great to have you as a neighbor.
Yeah, we are neighbors,
neighbors.
pretty much.
In a state like this, it doesn't take much to be neighbors, you know.
Yeah, good point. Well, yeah, I'm excited to see the show. I'm excited to hear the other podcasts that you've recorded so far and to see where it goes.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.